You guys doing all right? All right. Hey, great job hanging in. Thank you guys for locking in for that. Um, got a lot to talk about tonight, so just kind of hang in there, do your best. But I thought for just like the beginning of the school year, I thought this would be a good thing to kind of talk about. Um, and we are starting this series called UBU. Okay. When you guys go throughout the school year this year, you guys are going to have different friend groups from time to time. You're going to go from different sports to different sports. Whatever the case may be, there's going to be a lot of change that happens over the school year. And it's important for us that you are who God created you to be, no matter whether you're on the football team or the basketball team, or whether it's at school or whether it's at home, whether it's at church. No matter where you are, you need to be who God created you to be. Okay. How many of you guys have Spotify? Raise your hand. Yeah, you guys are awesome. How many of you guys have Apple Music? Bums. Look at all these bums raising their hand. Just kidding. I prefer Spotify like a normal human being. Okay, but how many of you guys have seen like the playlist that like they make for you? Like it's like a hey, like it's like a for you situation, and it like just gives you a whole bunch of different songs that you might like. How many of you guys have listened to that playlist before? The playlist, the what play? Yeah, it's I don't know. I've never seen it on Apple Music, but the playlist where like it creates like a playlist for you, and then you listen to it. It's based off what you listen to. Didn't act like it. Didn't act like it. But the algorithm, right? Depending on what you listen to, the algorithm gives you certain songs. Okay. And hey, if we were to rate that playlist on a scale of 1 to 10, let's hold up the number we think it is. Okay. Is it a 10? Does anybody think it's a perfect 10? Never is. Okay. 5, 6, 8. Ha, nope. Dodging it this year, buddy. Uh, right. Right. So listen, it's not the perfect playlist, right? We know that. You might get a few good songs out of it, and you might listen to them. That's great, but ultimately, it's not probably the best playlist. Okay. Switch gears a little bit. How many of you have ever had somebody make you a playlist? Whether it's like a boyfriend girlfriend situation, whether it's your best friend that made you a playlist. How many of you guys have ever had a playlist that was made for you? Nobody's made you guys playlists. KG. That's wild to me. Okay. Well, here's the deal. When when Rebecca and I started dating, of course, we had like a solid 20 songs that we'd listen to as we drive around Manhattan and go eat canes and do like whatever we did in college. And I took the 25 songs that we listened to, and I put them on a playlist. And in the little description, I wrote this nice little note. So I was like, "I love you. You're so great." Probably didn't say I love you because we just started dating, but maybe I did. I don't know. Right? That's a conversation for another time. But I made this playlist for her, and I put a little note in the little description, and I sent it to her. And did you like it? Was it good? KG. KG's right. So here's the deal. Tell me if somebody were okay, which one means more to you, right? The generated playlist from Spotify or Apple Music, or the playlist that somebody makes for you. Okay. Why? Okay. So here's the deal, right? Most of us would probably say the one that somebody makes for you, and here's why, right? Somebody takes time to build those playlists, right? Somebody put an effort. That's something that somebody wanted to do. They took time out of their day, right? That's meaningful stuff, right? When people take time out of the day to do something for you, that usually means more to us than things like the AI generated playlist that's like kind of mid. Okay, so I got a point in all of this. And it's going to lead into our series UBU. And this first week that we are talking about is um, God had created you for a purpose. Okay, you weren't some random result of an algorithm. You weren't made by accident. You weren't just thrown together and God kind of just hoped for the best. Like you were made on purpose. And I want to ask you guys an honest question, and I want you to be honest with yourself tonight. Does that feel true to you? right? This statement of you are made on purpose. Does that feel true to you? Because for a lot of us, I'd be willing to say that it doesn't. Not all the time, and perhaps not even most of the time. Right? Maybe it's your body, maybe it's the way you're built, the way you look. Right? There's things about us that we would change if we could. Maybe it's our family situation. Maybe the circumstances that you were born into or that you were raised in aren't great and you wish you could change that. Maybe it's your personality. Maybe there's parts of yourself that you're like, man, I'm glad I'm funny, right? Because the rest, you're like, I don't like the rest of my personality. Okay. Maybe it's something that's harder to name than all of those things. Maybe it's this feeling. Have any of you guys had this feeling of just like, you just feel like you're in the background the entire time? You guys ever been there? Things are going on around you and you're just there and you're just like, man, you're just not with it. It's like showing up to somebody's birthday party that you weren't invited to. That'd be pretty weird. Hey, I have a dream goal. I don't want any of you guys to do this, but if you do, I want you to tell me about it. Totally, this is totally on the shooting off the hip right now. Whenever you guys go into like, don't do this in Wichita, but if you're ever in like Hutch or even in Haven, if you see like a family reunion going on, just show up. No, dude, I'm so serious, and just be like, hey. Like you don't have to explain yours, guys. The cool part about family reunions is that people haven't seen each other, and not everybody knows who everybody is. And people bring guests sometimes, so free cake and refreshments probably. Not saying you should do that, but once again, if you do happen to accidentally show up to the wrong house and just start hanging out with a bunch of people you don't know, and it happens to be a family reunion, tell me about it. All right, right. But it's like this idea of, showing up to a party that you weren't invited to. And then you kind of show up and you can look around at other people and you kind of can make this decision in your head that everybody else has a version of themselves that makes sense. And what I mean by that is like the way their life is going, the things that they are doing in their life, they make sense for them. But yet you still are trying to discover what makes sense for you. Okay? And so the gap between you are made on purpose and what your life really looks like right now, that's probably a pretty decent sized gap. Right? And that's a real thing. Right? There's this idea, right? You're made on purpose, right? And you're trying to discover that purpose, but maybe right now you're still trying to find it. Okay? So here's where we're going to go. We're going to go about 3,000 years ago. And we're going to talk about David. What do you guys know about David? Shout out some stuff. Any of you guys that know anything about David? Yeah. Giant killer. Slayed Goliath. Kind of a dog. What else do we know about David? Anything else? Shepherd? Nice. Thanks, Abby. Shepherd boy. Eventually, he becomes the king of Israel. That's pretty cool. But what most of us don't talk about when it comes to David's life and what we would call his highlight reel is how complicated his life really was. In fact, he spent years of his life running, right? He made some serious mistakes through it all. He carried a lot of guilt, and he knew what it felt like when things go sideways and there's nothing you can do to fix it. Okay, you guys ever been there? Things aren't going well and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, it happens a lot. But yet somewhere in the middle of that, David wrote Psalm 139. And we don't know exactly when, but what we do know is David wasn't writing from a place to where he just had everything figured out. Okay? He was writing as someone who was fully known by a God who had been with him through all of these ups and downs. Right, the good seasons, the bad ones. He knew that God was with him during all these times, right? The victories, the failures, all of it. And so we're going to read Psalm 139. And something I want you guys to know is that it reads more like someone thinking out loud. And it's David kind of working through what it means to be made by God and and how he was created, he is in David. Okay, so we're gonna read Psalm 139 verses 13 through 16. I forgot to say this earlier. If you guys need a Bible, feel free to go grab one. If you want to share with somebody next to you for tonight, that's great. It will also be on the screen. Okay, so Psalm 139, 13 through 16 says, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was formed in the utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." So David is writing about formation. Okay, he's talking about being made, and the word that he chooses as he talks about this is this word knit. Okay, when I say the word knit, how many of you guys just think old people? Anybody? Be honest here. Yeah, I knew there was a couple of you guys out there. All right. I get it. Right. Oftentimes we associate knitting with older people who have some time on their hands. Right. And what we know about knitting is, one, it's slow, it's unhurried, and every single piece is intentional, and it's one stitch at a time. Okay. The person that's holding the needles doesn't have to be an old person. Okay, but the person holding the needles, they have a specific picture that they are wanting to create, right? They have a book or they have something online that they're looking at, right? But they're in no hurry to get there. They know what the finished product's going to look like, yet they are still going stitch by stitch. It's a slow process, and that's the word that David chose, right? It's not something that's built. It's not something that's manufactured, right? This word knit, it's the language of somebody who's, one, working carefully, two, working patiently, and three, somebody that is working on something that matters to them. Okay? He also said that God watched him being formed in utter seclusion. So what that means is, before David got a name, before David's parents knew that he was going to arrive on the earth, before anybody in the world knew that he existed, God was already there. God was already paying attention. And so then verse 16 takes it even further, right? Every day of David's life had already been written down before a single one of those events could ever happen. Right? God had this mapped out. God knew it was going to happen. Before David was even born, this was mapped out for him. That is God being invested in the whole story before it even started. So now we look at Psalm 139, and Psalm 139 as a song. And songs during this time, it'd be in Hebrew. It's a Hebrew tradition. Songs were sang by the whole community. Okay, which means everything David wrote about his own formation, what we just read, he was writing about the people who would sing it after them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sing this together. Okay, you guys ready? Just kidding. That would be weird. I would never do that to you guys. That would be very out of character for me. I would feel very embarrassed for a lot of you. Okay? Yeah, bro. You guys, yeah. Okay. No. But, right, everything David wrote about his own formation, he was writing about the people who would sing it after him, and that includes us today. So we're not going to sing it, but we did read it and that thing, okay? But we're not reading about David's experience from a distance. We're supposed to read it as our own, and that raises this question I have for you guys. If God was that present and that intentional about making David, what does that mean for the person who's sitting where you are right now? And for some of you guys whose brain is already fried from this week, and you guys are trying to process whatever I just said, what does that mean for you? right? If God was willing to do this for David, if God was willing to be that intentional for David and make him in that kind of a way and already have a plan for his life before he was even born, what does that mean for you? I have a few things. The first thing is that God knit you together on purpose. Okay? I think a lot of the time we are okay with this idea of that God made humanity. Okay? God made people. I think most of us could probably agree on that. Right? God created humanity. It's not a hard thing to believe. But what's harder to actually believe, and not just say that we believe, is that God made you specifically. Right? The same intentionality that God put into creating David isn't just for David, it is also for me and you. Right? Think about this a little bit. Here's a good example. Say you miss youth group for like a few weeks, and I sent you a text and I was like, hey, Carter, miss you at youth group this week, hope everything's all right. Okay, does that text mean more than my text in our group chat saying, hey, hope everybody can make it this week? Right? Okay, it's the same idea, right? It's personal. It's more personal. Right? You can tell the difference between both of those things immediately. One of those is a very generic, like, kind of just open. A lot of time, let's just be honest, those are the messages you skip over, are the ones that are generic for everybody. The ones that we tend to pay attention to are the ones that are personal to us. And that is the difference that David is pointing to. Right? One feels like someone was actually thinking about you, and the other one's generic. And so David has pointed to this, and the things that make you, right? The way your brain works, the things that come naturally to you, right? Even the things that don't, the things that you wish you could change. David is telling us that none of those things are by accident. And all of those choices were made by someone who was thinking about you before you were even born. Okay? That doesn't mean that everything in our life is going to be comfortable. It doesn't mean that everything in our life is going to be easy. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to explain it all. And it certainly doesn't mean that the difficult times and the difficult things that we face in our life aren't going to be difficult. But the good news is here's what that means. The choices that somebody made while he was thinking about you the entire time, right? We're talking about God. Right? Even though the things may be difficult or things may be hard, we can rely on this one fact, and it's that the person who made you knew what they were doing. So those things that we struggle with, the things that we don't like about ourselves, the things that we want to change about ourselves, we have to remember that when God created us like that, he knew what he was doing. Second thing for tonight is that you are made to reflect something bigger. David isn't just here to tell us that you were made carefully. Okay? Ultimately, what he is trying to get across is that you are made by God. Right? Anything made by God carries something of God in it. Right? If you come from God, if you are created by God, you reflect God. But as we are just in our day-to-day lives, most of us just aren't starting there. Most of us spend a lot of time just trying to figure out who we are. And most of that effort starts in the same place, right? We look inside and we say, who am I? What do I like? What do I feel? What's my personality type? We treat our identity it's like it's something that we have to figure out on our own. Right? We have to figure out on our own. We have to build it from scratch. We have to go on all these quests to finally figure out, hopefully by the end of the lives, who we are. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, that's exhausting. Every day having to ask yourself the question, who am I? What's my identity? Right? Doing that every day, trying to figure that out on our own is exhausting. Here's what's exhausting about it. If your identity is something that you have to figure out on your own, it also means that's something that you can lose. Right? One bad day, one failure, one moment where things didn't go the way you thought they would, and suddenly you don't know who you are anymore. Right? That's exhausting. And I'm willing to bet that honestly most of us have been there. In Ephesians 2:10, Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus, and he offers a completely different starting point. And he says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we could do the good things he planned for us long ago." Right? Paul called them a masterpiece. Something that was crafted with intention. It was designed with a purpose already in mind. And notice the question that Paul is answering here. It isn't, who am I? Right? This doesn't address, who am I? It addresses this question of, whose am I? Right? You and me, we are God's masterpiece. God created you. Right? Which, here's the good news. That means when we are looking for our identity, we don't have to look inside. It starts by looking at the one who made you and created you. And that's the foundation that one, it doesn't collapse when things get difficult. And I promise you, it is not exhausting. And here's what makes it all possible. Point 3, being fully known doesn't have to be scary. Okay? I'm willing to bet that not a lot of people know everything about you. Right? There are things that go in our lives that we hide from some people and we tell other people. Right? There's things that we tell our parents that we, and there are things that we don't tell our parents. Right? There are things that we tell our friends. There are things that we don't tell our friends. There are a lot of things we don't tell strangers. And there are some things that we just apparently do tell to strangers. Right? It's weird how that all works. Right? But here's the thing. Most of us have a strong instinct to hide. Right? If somebody knew everything about you, every embarrassing moment, every mistake you've made, everything that we think we'd be scared to say out loud, think about it that way. If everybody knew about that, we would want to disappear. If somebody knew every single embarrassing moment of your life, even the things that you do not tell people, if somebody said, "Hey, I know about this," I am willing to bet whatever that thing is, we're getting out of here and we're going home and we're probably not coming back. And it's hard because in our experience, being fully known and being fully seen by somebody feels like a risk, right? What if they find out who I really am? What if they find out who I really am and then they decide that I'm not worth it? Psalm 139 is saying that's already the situation, right? God knows every word before it leaves your mouth. He knows every day before you go and live it. God was present in the earliest moments of your formation, and he will be around longer than you are here on earth. right? But before you had a name, before you had a voice, before you had any awareness of yourself at all, God was already paying attention. Okay? And David isn't the only one that who heard this. Okay, centuries before Jesus was born, God said something to a guy named Jeremiah that stopped him in his tracks. Jeremiah 1:5 says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. So Jeremiah's first response was to basically tell God that he had the wrong person. Right? He was young. He didn't think he had what it took. But God wasn't there... or God's point wasn't to be like, hey, here's what I need from you. It was, here's what I already know about you. Right? I knew you before you existed. I knew you before you even had the opportunity to prove anything, or before you could fail at everything. Everything, that would be bad. Anything, God knew. So here's what that means for that version of you that you wish nobody saw. Right? The one that shows up when you're at your worst. The one that makes mistakes that we're not willing to say out loud. God is not surprised by that version. He's not. He's not surprised. God knows. God knew it was coming before you took your first breath. And yet, even though you made that mistake, God still decided that you were worth creating. Okay? David, out of all people, had plenty to hide. And yet he still invited God to look closer. And that kind of response only comes from someone who has figured out something that most of us are still working on. Being fully known and fully loved aren't in conflict with each other. For God, they go together, right? God knows everything about you, yet he still chooses to love you. So for God, they go together, and if that's true, it changes how we should see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. So our action points just for this week, our first one being is personalize Psalm 139. So take Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16, and I want you to rewrite it to make it personal. Right? Write it as if David is giving you the pen and asking you to make it about yourself specifically. Be personal, be honest. And then what I want you to do is read it aloud to God. Right? David wrote this as a song. Right? It was meant to be spoken, not just something that was studied. So I want you guys to say it out loud. It doesn't need to sound polished. Or doesn't need to be a poem. Right? Nobody's going to grade you on this. There's no version that's too simple or too short. The only thing that matters is that it's about what you choose to say to God. If you're stuck, try finishing the sentence. God, you made me with, fill in the blank, and keep going from there. Okay? Even a few lines that you genuinely mean, that genuinely comes from your heart, are better than something that's just generic. Second thing, invite God into a new area of your life. David ended Psalm 139 by inviting God to search him. He spends this whole psalm sitting with this reality that God already knew everything about him, and his response was to lean into that rather than run away for it. Right? Opening a door rather than keeping it shut. Think about that area of your life that you haven't given God much access. Maybe it's a part of your life that you have tried to keep hidden. Maybe there's something that you keep trying to figure out completely on your own. Or maybe it's an area of your life where you're just not sure that God was that intentional about creating you. Maybe it's something that you don't want to look at too closely. And whatever it is for you, it's all going to be different for everybody. This week, I want you to invite God in by name, out loud. You don't have to have it figured out. That's the nice part. God is willing to meet you in the middle of that. You don't have to clean up your life before bringing it to God. The invitation of inviting God into that part of your life is the step, and it's enough to start with that. Our third thing and our last thing for tonight is to thank God for how he made you. Think of one specific thing, just one thing about how you're wired and that you've never stopped to thank God for. Right? It could be a personality trait, the way that you see the world, something that's just always been there. This week, I just want you guys to thank God for it, but once again, out loud and be specific. Okay, David didn't just describe what it felt like to be known by God. He responded to it. Right? He says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex." And that wasn't just some automatic response. It was a choice that David had to make. And it's the same choice in front of all of us right now. You don't have to feel it fully to say it honestly, right? Start with one thing. Say it out loud. Okay. God was here before you existed. God was paying attention before you had a name. And God decided that you and me were both still worth creating exactly how we are. And that's this is the foundation of this series, UBU, that we're going to spend the next 3 weeks on. Is going to be built on this idea that God knew you before you existed. He knew the choices and the decisions that you were going to make. But at the end of the day, God still decided you were worth making exactly how you are. Okay.